It was late in the night, the kind of hour when most people are asleep, wrapped in the comfort of their beds, far from the noise and rush of the day. The company's headquarters stood quiet, with only a few dim lights glowing in the vast parking lot. The building, usually alive with movement and chatter during the day, now seemed like a sleeping giant. The only sound was the occasional chirp of crickets in the distance and the faint hum of a street light struggling to stay lit. The CEO, dressed in plain clothes, walked slowly through the area. Nobody knew who he was that night. He wasn't wearing his usual suit, nor did he have his usual presence of authority. He was just another worker, blending in with the shadows, part of an experiment he had agreed to take on. For weeks, he had been moving quietly within his own company, trying to see life as his employees lived it without titles, without luxury, without anyone treating him differently. His footsteps echoed softly against the concrete ground as he wandered past the rows of parked cars. He looked around, carefully observing, making mental notes of small details, how the night shift felt, how the environment treated workers, and what kind of hidden challenges might exist that never reached the boardroom. That's when he saw him. Near the far end of the lot, under a corner where the lights didn't quite reach, a young man sat on a low wooden stool. His posture was slightly hunched forward, his eyes fixed on the thick book resting on his lap. The man was in uniform, the kind worn by security guards. The dull shine of his badge caught the faint glow of the flashlight he held. The flashlight itself seemed old, its beam unsteady, flickering every now and then as if it was almost out of power. Yet the guard's focus didn't waver. The CEO slowed his pace, careful not to disturb the moment. Something about the scene made him pause. The guard wasn't simply passing time, there was determination in the way he read. His lips moved slightly, as though he was trying to memorize something important, repeating words quietly to himself. He held the flashlight close to the page, straining his eyes, but his expression carried no frustration, only concentration, and perhaps, a quiet kind of hope. It was a curious sight. Many employees, especially during a quiet night shift, might lean back, scroll through their phones, or fight against sleep. But here was a man choosing to spend his limited rest hours studying. In the silence of the night, with only a flickering flashlight as company, he was chasing something beyond the present moment. The CEO stood there, hidden in the shadows for a while, simply observing. Thoughts stirred in his mind. What kind of book was it? Why was this guard studying so late, after what must already have been a tiring day? Was this just a hobby, or was there a dream he was quietly building? He walked a little closer, making sure not to startle the young man. The crunch of his shoes against the gravel made the guard look up quickly, his eyes alert, his hand instinctively lowering the flashlight. But when he saw it was only another worker, dressed plainly, he relaxed a little. Still, his posture remained polite, respectful. "Long night?" the CEO asked in a casual tone, keeping his identity hidden. The guard nodded with a faint smile. "It usually is," he replied softly. His voice carried both tiredness and calmness, as though he had grown used to the silence of these hours. The CEO's eyes moved to the book. "What are you studying?" he asked, curious. The guard hesitated for a second, almost as if unsure whether to share. Then he turned the book slightly, revealing a cover filled with dense text. It was a technical manual, something connected to certifications in a professional field. "I'm preparing for exams," he said, his voice steadier now. "I want to qualify for better work, something that will help me support my family." The words were simple, but they carried weight. The CEO could sense it immediately. This wasn't just studying for the sake of knowledge. This was studying for survival, for growth, for a chance at a different future. The flashlight beam wavered a little, but the young man didn't seem to notice. His focus was already back on the page, his determination stronger than the exhaustion in his eyes. The CEO didn't press further that night. He simply nodded, offered a small word of encouragement, and moved on. But the image stayed in his mind. Long after he returned to his own quiet corner, he could not shake the picture: a hard-working security guard, sacrificing his rest, trying to climb towards something bigger with nothing more than a flashlight and a dream. The night stretched on, uneventful in other ways, but that moment had already planted a thought in the CEO's heart. He had come undercover to observe operations, to learn about processes and systems. But instead, what he had stumbled upon was a living story of determination, one that no report or meeting could ever reveal. Hours later, when the dawn began to push back the darkness, painting the horizon with faint streaks of light, the guard was still there, book in hand. His eyes were heavy, his body no doubt aching for rest, but he refused to waste a single minute. The flashlight had finally given up, its beam gone, yet he had moved under the parking lot lamp, adjusting his seat to keep reading. The CEO watched from a distance as the first morning employees began to arrive. Most of them passed by without noticing the guard's quiet struggle, without realizing the story unfolding right in front of them. To them, he was just another worker in uniform. But to the CEO, he had already become something more, a reminder that ambition often hides in the most ordinary places, waiting for someone to see it. That night marked the beginning of a journey neither of them could have predicted. The next few nights followed a quiet rhythm. The CEO, still undercover, made it a habit to walk past the far corner of the parking lot. Each time, without fail, he saw the same young security guard with his book open, flashlight or lamp in hand, fighting sleep and pushing through his studies. At first, the CEO kept his distance. He didn't want to interfere or draw attention. But his curiosity grew stronger each night. There was something powerful about that image: the uniformed guard, eyes weary but steady, whispering words under the weak light as though those pages held the keys to his future. Finally, the CEO decided to engage him more. One evening, after checking in with a few other workers, he slowly approached the guard again. The man looked up, a little surprised but not alarmed. He remembered the stranger's face from the other night and gave a polite nod. "Still at it?" the CEO asked, smiling gently. The guard gave a short laugh, rubbing his eyes. "Yes. The exam is only a few months away. I have to use whatever time I can find." The CEO sat down on the edge of a low concrete block nearby. He wanted to keep his voice casual, so the guard wouldn't feel nervous. "That's impressive. Most people would be asleep by now." The guard shrugged. "Sleep is nice, but dreams are better. If I pass this exam, I can move forward. My family depends on me, so I can't waste time." Those words stayed with the CEO. Sleep is nice, but dreams are better. He repeated them in his mind, almost as if they were a piece of wisdom meant for him, too. Over the next week, their conversations grew longer. Sometimes they talked only for a few minutes, other times, when the night was slow and quiet, they shared stories. The CEO learned that the guard's name was Arjun. He was in his late 20s, married, with 2 small children at home. His wife worked part-time, but most of the household income came from his security job. Arjun explained that he had once dreamed of finishing college, but financial struggles had forced him to drop out early and find work. Still, he never let go of the idea that one day he could qualify for a professional career. The exam he was studying for would open the door to a job in administration or technical support, anything that paid better than night shifts and offered a stable future for his family. The CEO listened quietly, asking gentle questions, never revealing who he truly was. He didn't want Arjun to feel pressured or change his words. What touched him most was not just Arjun's ambition, but the humility with which he carried it. He didn't complain about his situation. He didn't blame anyone. He simply accepted his reality and kept working towards something better. One night, the CEO noticed how worn out the flashlight had become. Its light flickered more than usual, and Arjun had to shake it several times just to keep it working. Finally, the CEO asked, "Why don't you study inside the building, where there's better light?" Arjun smiled faintly. "I don't want to disturb anyone. The office is empty, yes, but I feel this is my place. I'm on duty here. I can't forget that. If I go inside, I might get too comfortable and lose focus on my job." The answer impressed the CEO even more. Here was a man who not only worked hard for himself, but also respected his responsibilities with discipline. He wasn't just chasing his dream, he was balancing it with integrity. As the nights went on, the CEO found himself thinking about Arjun even outside of work. During his private moments, he compared this young man's determination to some of the executives he worked with. Many of them had resources, education, and comfort, yet they often lacked the fire Arjun carried within him. It was a humbling thought. One evening, the conversation turned more personal. Arjun spoke softly, almost as if confessing a secret. "Sometimes I feel tired, very tired. There are nights when I wonder if it's worth it. But then I think of my children. I don't want them to grow up seeing me only as a night guard. I want them to know that no matter where you start, you can climb higher if you keep pushing. That's why I read even when my eyes hurt. That's why I keep going." The CEO felt a lump in his throat. He had met countless professionals, but very few spoke with such pure honesty. He realized that Arjun's struggle wasn't just about passing an exam. It was about dignity, hope, and the silent promise a father makes to his children. One night, as the clock moved past midnight, the CEO brought him a cup of tea from the vending machine inside. "Here, you need this more than me," he said. Arjun was surprised but grateful. "Thank you. Most people don't even notice I'm here." The CEO chuckled softly. "Sometimes the most important people are the ones no one notices." That small act of kindness seemed to build a quiet trust between them. Their talks became more open. Arjun even showed him the notes he had been making, pages filled with neat handwriting, underlined key points, and tiny reminders written in the margins. Every page was proof of hours stolen from rest, hours invested in hope. The CEO found himself inspired. He started looking forward to those night walks, not as a duty for his undercover project, but as a chance to witness raw determination. He realized that learning about the company's inner workings was useful, but learning about people like Arjun was priceless. The more he learned, the more he respected him. Here was a man with little, doing so much. And he did it without expecting recognition, without asking for sympathy. All he wanted was a fair chance. As days passed, the CEO's heart grew heavier with the knowledge he carried. He knew something Arjun did not, that he wasn't just talking to another worker, but to the very person who had the power to change his path. Yet he stayed silent for the moment, letting the story unfold naturally. What struck him most was how invisible Arjun's struggle was to everyone else. Employees walked past him each morning, never knowing that during those long nights he was not just guarding the company's property but also guarding his dream. Nobody saw how he whispered lessons under a weak light or how he forced his tired mind to absorb one more page before dawn. But the CEO saw it. He felt it. And he knew deep inside that something about this meeting was not by chance. Every time he returned to his comfortable home after those nights, he thought of Arjun sitting in the cold, fighting sleep with nothing but a book and an old flashlight. The contrast was sharp, almost painful. He had started the Undercover program to understand his company better, but now he realized he was also understanding life differently. The CEO began to wonder, what would happen if someone gave Arjun the chance he deserved? What if his effort was recognized, his dream supported? Would it only change Arjun's life, or could it also inspire countless others across the company? These questions kept growing in his mind. He didn't yet know what steps he would take, but he knew one thing with certainty: this was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning of something bigger. And so, Night after night, he continued his quiet visits, each conversation peeling back another layer of Arjun's world, each word planting a deeper seed in the CEO's heart. He had set out undercover to find hidden truths about his company. Instead, he had found a hidden star. The undercover assignment eventually came to an end. For weeks, the CEO had lived in disguise, walking among his own employees as though he were one of them. He had learned many things about the daily challenges of his workers, about the little issues that no report ever mentioned, about the small victories and quiet frustrations that filled their days. But above all, he had learned something far more personal. He had discovered Arjun. The image of the young security guard, sitting under the dim glow of a flashlight, had carved itself into his memory. Even after he returned to his real position, back in the tall office on the top floor with its wide glass windows and polished furniture, he could not stop thinking about it. While executives discussed budgets and strategies, his mind would sometimes drift back to that corner of the parking lot, where a determined man fought sleep just to read one more line from his textbook. The CEO knew he could not simply let that memory fade. There was something special about Arjun's story, something that deserved more than just admiration from afar. He wanted to know more. Who was this young man, really? What kind of person sacrificed comfort and rest for the hope of a better future? And so, quietly, he began to gather information. Without revealing his intentions to anyone, he asked the head of security for the personnel files. He explained that he was reviewing night shift staffing, which was true enough. When he found Arjun's file, he opened it carefully, reading every line as though it were a novel. The file was simple, almost ordinary. Arjun had been with the company for 4 years. No complaints had ever been filed against him. His record showed perfect attendance, rare for someone working nights. He had volunteered for extra shifts many times, sometimes covering for others without asking for additional pay. His supervisors had written short notes describing him as reliable, quiet, and hard-working. Nothing dramatic, nothing flashy, yet between those plain words lay a story of consistency and dedication. The CEO leaned back in his chair, feeling a quiet respect grow stronger inside him. In a company with thousands of employees, how many others had such a record, unnoticed, uncelebrated? He dug deeper, asking subtle questions during casual conversations. From a few colleagues, he learned that Arjun rarely spoke about himself. He was polite, always respectful, but kept to his duties. Outside of work, nobody seemed to know much about him, only that he sometimes looked tired, and that he often carried books in his bag. The CEO's curiosity grew into admiration. Here was a man who had every reason to give up, yet refused to surrender. Here was a man who carried dreams larger than his circumstances, and who quietly built the bridge to those dreams, one page, one night, one shift at a time. One evening, long after most workers had left, the CEO sat alone in his office. The city lights glowed outside the window, stretching endlessly into the horizon. He thought of Arjun again. He thought of the difference between them, not just in wealth or status, but in opportunity. He remembered his own journey, how he had worked hard, yes, but also how many doors had been opened for him by others. Teachers, mentors, family, people had believed in him, supported him, lifted him when he stumbled. What did Arjun have? A weak flashlight, a stack of borrowed books, and a dream he refused to let go of. The thought moved him deeply. He realized something important: talent and determination often lived in silence, hidden away in corners nobody noticed. It wasn't always the loudest voice in the meeting room or the brightest face in the office that carried true strength. Sometimes, it was the quiet man guarding a parking lot at midnight. The next morning, the CEO called for more details. He learned that Arjun had applied for several internal positions before, but had never been selected. Not because he lacked ability, he had performed well in written tests, but because he lacked higher qualifications, which were mandatory for those roles. That explained why he was studying so hard now. If he passed the external certification exams, he would finally be eligible. The CEO felt both admiration and a sting of sadness. How many times had this young man faced rejection? How many times had he walked back to his post, heart heavy but still determined to try again? And still, he had not quit. That day, during a break in his schedule, the CEO closed his eyes for a moment and pictured Arjun again, hunched over his book, lips moving quietly, flashlight trembling in his hand. That image had become more than a memory, it had become a symbol. A symbol of why leadership mattered. A symbol of why companies existed in the first place, not just to make profit, but to lift people higher, to create chances where there were none. He began to wonder what he could do. Should he call Arjun directly? Should he announce something publicly? Or should he act quietly, guiding him toward opportunity without revealing too much? The decision was not simple. He knew that giving special treatment might seem unfair to others, but he also knew that sometimes fairness meant recognizing extraordinary effort. For several days, he carried this question in his mind. In meetings, while others spoke about markets and strategies, he found himself sketching notes on the side of his papers, plans, ideas, small ways to make a difference. He was careful not to act too quickly, but the desire to help grew stronger with each passing day. At one point, he even considered visiting Arjun again in disguise, just to hear more of his story directly. But he realized the time for disguise was ending. The real test was ahead, what he would do now, as a CEO, not as a hidden observer. One evening, while driving home, he thought about Arjun's children. He imagined them waiting for their father, too young to understand why he worked such long hours, too young to realize the sacrifices he was making. He imagined the pride they would one day feel if he succeeded. And then he imagined the pain they might feel if he failed, if his dreams never came true despite all his effort. That image lit a fire in the CEO's heart. He knew then that he could not remain a silent observer any longer. Arjun had shown him something precious, the courage to dream in the dark. Now it was his turn to bring light. The CEO leaned back in his chair that night, his eyes fixed on the city skyline, and whispered to himself, "It's time to act." The day came when the CEO could no longer remain silent. For weeks, he had carried Arjun's story inside his heart, weighing possibilities and quietly shaping a plan. Now, with every detail carefully thought out, he was ready to act. He asked his assistant to arrange a private meeting with one of the security guards. "Tell him it's a standard review," the CEO said casually, not wanting to draw attention. The assistant nodded, unaware of the deeper reason. Later that week, on a bright morning, Arjun received a message that the management wanted to meet with him. At first, he was nervous. He had never been called upstairs before. He wondered if something had gone wrong. Had someone complained? Had he made a mistake during his shift? Thoughts raced through his mind as he changed into a clean uniform and made his way to the top floor. The elevator ride felt endless. His palms were damp, and his heart beat faster with every floor. Finally, when the doors opened, he stepped into a space unlike anything he had seen before: polished floors, glass walls, and quiet hallways that carried an air of importance. He followed the directions given to him until he reached a large office door. Inside, the CEO sat waiting. But this time, he was not in plain clothes. He was in his formal attire, the way the world usually saw him: confident, composed, carrying the quiet authority of leadership. When Arjun entered, he rose from his chair with a warm smile. "Please, come in, Arjun," he said gently. Arjun froze for a second. The face before him was familiar, yet entirely different. Recognition flooded his mind. This was not a fellow worker. This was the head of the entire company. The man he had been casually talking to during lonely night shifts was, in truth, the CEO himself. For a moment, Arjun didn't know whether to sit or stand. His eyes widened, and his voice caught in his throat. Sir. I. I didn't know. The CEO lifted a hand kindly. It's all right. Sit down. Please. Slowly, hesitantly, Arjun sat, still overwhelmed. His mind spun back to all the nights he had shared his dreams, his struggles, his hopes with the man sitting across from him. Embarrassment and shock mixed inside him. The CEO leaned forward, his voice calm. I want you to know something, Arjun. I was part of an undercover program in my own company. I wanted to see the real lives of my employees. That's why I was there, walking in the parking lot at night. And that's how I met you. Arjun lowered his head, unsure what to say. The CEO continued. Do you remember the first night I saw you? You were reading under that weak flashlight. You probably thought nobody noticed. But I did. And I couldn't forget it. Arjun's eyes lifted slowly. He nodded faintly, still silent. I started asking myself, the CEO said, his tone thoughtful, what kind of man spends his nights working to protect a company, while also sacrificing rest just to study? What kind of strength does it take to do both? Arjun's voice finally emerged, soft and uncertain. Sir, I only wanted to give my family a better life. I didn't think anyone was watching. The CEO smiled warmly. That is exactly why it matters. You weren't doing it to be noticed. You were doing it because it's who you are, responsible, hardworking, determined. The room grew quiet for a moment. The CEO let the silence settle, giving Arjun time to breathe. Then, leaning back in his chair, he said the words that would change everything. Arjun, I want to help you. I don't just want to admire your effort from afar. I want to make sure that effort leads you somewhere. Arjun blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. Help me, sir. Yes, the CEO said firmly. I've seen your dedication. I've read your record. You've given this company your loyalty for years, and in return, you deserve more than just long nights and a small paycheck. I want to offer you something, a scholarship program that will cover the costs of your exams and further studies. In addition, I'd like to provide you with mentorship from within the company, so you can learn skills beyond your security role. The words struck Arjun like lightning. His breath caught in his chest, and his eyes filled with sudden tears. For years, he had carried his dream quietly, believing he was alone in the struggle. Now, in this single moment, the head of the entire company was not only acknowledging it but also promising to support it. He opened his mouth, but no words came. His throat tightened. Finally, after a long pause, he whispered, Sir. I don't know what to say. Say yes, the CEO replied kindly. Say you will continue working hard, not just for your family, but also for yourself. Say you'll accept this chance, because you've earned it. Arjun pressed his palms together, overwhelmed. Yes, sir. I promise I will not waste this chance. I will work harder than ever. The CEO smiled, relief softening his face. That's all I wanted to hear. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur for Arjun. The CEO explained how the company would support him, not only with funding but also with time. He would be allowed flexible hours when exams approached, so he could balance work and study without breaking himself. He would also have access to senior employees who could guide him. Before Arjun left the office, the CEO added one last thing. I want you to remember, Arjun, sometimes the greatest talent hides in the quietest corners. You reminded me of that. Your story is important, not just for you, but for everyone here. One day, when you succeed, others will look at you and believe they can succeed too. Arjun left the room with trembling steps, his heart racing, his mind struggling to grasp what had just happened. Only a short time ago, he had been sitting in the cold parking lot, light flickering, unsure if his efforts would ever bear fruit. Now, the highest authority in the company had given him hope so bright it felt unreal. When he returned home that evening, his wife noticed something different in his eyes. "What happened?" she asked gently. For a long moment, Arjun couldn't answer. He simply hugged her tightly, holding back tears. Then, with a trembling voice, he told her everything. Her eyes filled as she listened, and together they realized their lives were about to change in ways they had never dared imagine. Meanwhile, back in his office, the CEO sat quietly by the window, looking out at the city. A sense of peace filled him. He knew he had done the right thing. Leadership, he thought, was not only about profits or strategies. It was about seeing the unseen, about lifting people who carried silent dreams. That night, as he left the building, he looked at the same corner of the parking lot where he had first seen Arjun. The stool was empty, the flashlight gone. But in his mind, the picture remained clear. A picture of determination in the dark, a picture that had now found its light. And this was only the beginning. Months passed, and the promise made in that quiet office began to unfold into reality. Arjun threw himself into his studies with renewed energy, this time with less fear. The financial support from the company meant he could buy updated study materials instead of relying only on borrowed books. The mentorship sessions opened doors he had never imagined, giving him guidance on subjects that once felt too difficult. For the first time in years, he did not feel like he was climbing a mountain alone. Every evening after his shifts, he returned home to find his children waiting eagerly. They had noticed the difference too. Their father no longer studied under a weak flashlight in the cold parking lot. Instead, he sat at the dining table with proper lighting, his books spread out neatly, his mind calmer and sharper. His children sometimes sat beside him, doing their own homework, proud to share the same table of learning. At work, whispers began to spread. Some employees had heard about the CEO's unexpected support for a security guard. At first, people were surprised. A guard receiving scholarships and mentorship? It was unheard of. But as they saw Arjun's determination, the surprise turned into admiration. One evening, a colleague from another department approached him quietly. "I heard what the CEO is doing for you," she said. "It gives me hope. Sometimes I feel stuck in my own role, but seeing you work so hard makes me believe I can try again too." Arjun felt humbled. He had never intended to inspire anyone. He was simply following his own path. But now he realized that his effort was shining beyond himself, touching the lives of others who were silently struggling too. The CEO, meanwhile, kept a watchful but respectful distance. He did not interfere in every detail of Arjun's journey, but he made sure that the support system promised to him remained strong. Every few weeks, he would ask his team for updates not only on Arjun's progress, but also on how the scholarship program might be extended to others in the future. When the exam day finally arrived, Arjun walked into the hall with steady steps. His heart pounded, but he carried inside him months of preparation and years of quiet determination. As he turned the first page of the question paper, he remembered all the nights of studying in the parking lot, the flickering flashlight, the whispered words under the stars. He remembered the moment the CEO revealed his true identity and told him he believed in him. Those memories gave him strength. Hours later, as he left the hall, he felt lighter. He had done his best. For the first time, he believed that his best might truly be enough. Weeks passed before the results were announced. When Arjun saw his name on the list of those who had passed, he sat in silence for a long time, his hands trembling. Tears filled his eyes, not tears of sadness, but of relief and joy. His children hugged him tightly, his wife smiled through her own tears, and in that small home, celebration filled the air. Soon after, the company officially promoted him into a new role. It was not the highest position, but it was a step forward, a step he had been chasing for years. He moved into an administrative department, where his skills and new qualifications could be put to real use. Walking into his new office on the first day, he felt nervous again. But this time, it was a different kind of nervousness. It was the nervousness of opportunity, of beginning a new chapter. His colleagues welcomed him warmly, some already aware of his remarkable journey. To them, he was not just a new staff member, he was proof that hard work and persistence could truly change lives. The CEO invited him for a meeting a few weeks later. This time, the atmosphere was different. Arjun no longer sat as a guard being offered unexpected kindness. He sat as a man who had earned his place through effort and perseverance. "I told you before, Arjun," the CEO said with a smile, "that your story is bigger than you. Do you see it now?" Arjun nodded. "Yes, sir. People have told me that my journey gives them courage. I never thought that would happen." The CEO leaned back thoughtfully. "That is the true power of your story. You did not chase recognition, yet you became an example. That is what makes it real." In the months that followed, the company launched a new initiative inspired by Arjun's journey. A program was created to support employees who wanted to continue their education while working. Scholarships, mentorship sessions, and flexible schedules were offered. The announcement brought excitement across the organization. For the first time, people felt that their personal dreams mattered to the company, not just their daily work. Arjun became a quiet symbol of this change. He never stood on a stage or gave big speeches, but his presence spoke louder than words. Whenever employees saw him walking through the building in his new role, they remembered the story of the man who once sat in the parking lot with a flashlight, refusing to give up. One afternoon, as he walked past the security desk where new guards now sat, he paused for a moment. He remembered his own long nights there, the silence, the cold, the exhaustion. He smiled warmly at the young guard on duty and said, "Keep believing in yourself. You never know who might be watching." The guard looked confused for a moment, but then smiled back, feeling the sincerity in his words. At home, life also changed. His children began to speak proudly of their father's journey at school. His wife, who had always stood beside him quietly, now carried her own pride more openly. Their home felt brighter, not because of wealth, but because of the hope that filled it. The CEO often reflected on the experience too. In his speeches to shareholders or during meetings with managers, he occasionally mentioned a lesson learned from an unexpected place. Without giving too many details, he spoke of how greatness often hides where we least expect it, and how true leadership is not only about recognizing talent but also about nurturing it. Years later, when Arjun looked back on his life, he knew that the night he had been discovered by the CEO was the turning point. But he also understood something deeper: the CEO had only opened a door. It was his own persistence that had prepared him to walk through it. And so, the story of a security guard studying under a flashlight became more than just a personal tale. It became a reminder for everyone in the company and for anyone who heard it that determination, no matter how hidden, has the power to shine. The journey that began in the shadows of a parking lot had grown into a light bright enough to inspire hundreds. It was proof that dreams, no matter how small or how quietly carried, can change not only one life, but many lives around it if only someone takes the time to see them.